this meeting to order. Secretary, acknowledge all members present.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President.
The first thing I'd like to do is congratulate the boys and girls basketball teams. They both won the first round of playoffs and have reached the semifinals. And they're actually playing in Milton tonight. This is the first time in 10 years the boys have made the playoffs, let alone made it to the semifinals. And it's the first time in school history that the boys and girls played a doubleheader. And on Saturday, we hosted the Central Sectional Wrestling Tournament, and our boys won the entire tournament, and we are moving 8 kids on to districts. And it's Kyle Bennett, Garrett Hoffman, Gavin Hoffman, Morgan Kamini, Ben Cerny, Michael Forney, Wyatt Lutz, Jacob Strossner, and Keith Batowski. In addition to all this, Garrett Hoffman broke Luke Fry's most win records in the finals, getting his 158th win, pinning his opponent in a minute and a half.
Mr. President, I'd also like to recognize the choral concerts a couple weeks ago. Standing room in the crowd from 105 students. Great performance, kids, great performance.
Mr. Snell, I'd also like to recognize another one of our students, senior Cassandra Krause. She's been elected Key Club Lieutenant Governor for our division, Division 12. That includes, among other schools, Wales Point, South Wales, Fort Losac, Muncie. Her responsibility would be to, she'll promote and be responsible for planning divisional rallies, encouraging all of our officers to fulfill their responsibility. And I'd like to give Sandra a round of applause and thank her for the positive attention she has brought to the Montoursville area school district.
The next thing is, we've heard claims that the board violated the Sunshine Act by receiving a codes report before the last meeting. The board did not violate the Sunshine Act. At the request of Jerry Kilgus, codes officer for Central Keystone Council of Governments, the board members received Mr. Kilgus's report about codes issues at the high school. The board did not deliberate or did not take any action in private. It is not a violation of the Sunshine Act for board members to receive information. Any and all deliberation and official action on codes issued was taken at the public meeting when the board voted to address the codes issues using contractors already on site. We would now like to have the presentation by Paul Taylor and Scott Cousins of Crabtree Rural Associates.
Mr. Snell. And are we going to dip them? Tonight we are presenting our findings of our report that we told you we would engage about 4 weeks ago, about a month ago. And the engineer is with us tonight, our project manager Scott Cousin, engineer John Solarchek, principal of our firm, Doug Rohrbach, and of course, Dick Cather from the field work and field oversight. And we have a handout or a report that I think is in your possession, will be in your possession pretty quickly. And it, in fact, has a lot of information and data to support some of the highlights that I'm going to go over tonight. And I'm going to kick it off with some of the bigger overview issues, but I'm going to turn it over about midway to Scott Cousin to go over some costs. So let's just get right into it now. And in fact, last time we were here, we talked about what would be the goals of our analysis, or what were we going to be focusing on. And here they are. We were to determine eligibility for your $3.3 million of state reimbursement. We did have a little bit of a conversation on that, but it was decided that if we can maintain or see if you can remain eligible with a different approach to this project, it would be ultimately beneficial to the district, obviously with the $3.3 million. The next item, and I'll talk about that in a minute. This is just a list of what we looked at. The next item was the cost to achieve LEED Gold in energy efficiency with a different project approach. That was the $2 million grant. You had to achieve Green Gold, we gave you $2 million. And we thought we would at least look at that because that money has already been granted to a project here. We'll see the results of that. Also critical to pursuing a different project would be redesign time and regulatory agency review and approval, and how that affects schedule. We'll have that to look at. Educational and infrastructure adequacy. We felt obliged to at least look at what the original project offered and what is being offered with the revised value engineering project, and put that on the table for you to look at and decide what's important and what's not important, and to make your decisions based on that information, at least in those areas. And of course, the last item was what we thought the cost of the proposed VE option, and I could appropriately say VE option approach, or approaches, or options. There's different parts to that. There are some things you can elect to do or not to do, but we do have costs on a particular package of work that we think would meet the what we understand your goals to be, in part. One of those would be to make the building last another 20 years. So very quickly, just for everybody's benefit, I want to just review what we're talking about with this value engineering project suggestion. And it's hard to see, but this is the existing building here. There's the track, of course. This piece of the building is already built. This is the new tech ed area that's almost complete. And what this is really showing, it's from our civil engineer, it's site work that is necessary to implement this project approach. We have to maintain a certain number of parking. We have to maintain the number of parking spaces that exist today. So eliminating some parking spaces with this science lab location. We'll talk about that in a minute, but this is the area of the land and the outline of the science lab location. That displays some parking. This is the area of expansion of the band and choral music and stage area. That displays some parking. So these are areas to put new parking in to meet your minimum requirements. And then this red area is the idea of the bus drop-off on this side of the building, and then an automobile improvement drop-off for automobiles, improvements in this area on that street. Again, I'm not going to get into that deeply, but this is the revised site plan to go along with what regulatory agency requirements we think we're going to have to abide by, meet the requirements, and also, of course, the ideas of the bus drop-off, the automobile drop-off, and then this location for the science labs. Here we can see the building as it's proposed in the value engineering study, and what we recognized was that there were about 3 recognizable levels of renovation. They're indicated up here: level 1, level 2, level 3. Level 1 would be the lightest or most minimal amount of renovation. The second darker color, orangey color, would be level 2, and then this darker reddish brownish color would be level 3, and that would be the most expensive renovation areas. To give you an example, starting with the most expensive, here is the area of the shops, the existing shops, not the new shops over here, these are the new shops, but the existing shop area, that is being looked at as a library and computer lab area. So there's some extensive demolition and reconfiguration, new finishes, and a whole new interior design for this particular function, the library and computer function in this area. That will cost the most per square foot to make that happen. Going to the least expensive, lighter color, the gymnasium. We've always said right from the beginning that the gym isn't in that bad a shape. It needs some work, but it's not an extensive amount. And that light color goes all through this area of the building where existing classrooms, cafeteria, the gym, as I said, the auditorium, there's areas that are slated to receive the least amount of renovation or a minimal amount. Now, the other red area would be converting the existing library into an auxiliary gym and related functions in this area, and also moving the the school administration into this end of the stone building and converting classrooms into office space along with all the electrical and heating and ventilation and air conditioning work, plumbing work that goes along with making that kind of a move. So that would be a more expensive renovation. This middle color is a mid-level renovation cost where you are taking science labs out of this area, for instance. They're going to move over to this new piece, but you have to come back here, and after you've got out the science lab, you have to convert that into a classroom, or in some of these bigger spaces, maybe make those 2 classrooms. And I do apologize if I'm fighting a cold. Sorry, my cough is so loud. I apologize. But the other area that falls into that mid-level renovation would be the locker room area here. The more extensive renovation off of the stage and music area, where we're expanding the band and chorus rooms out into this region. This is an addition, and we're expanding the stage. And so this is an area, again, without getting into all the details, this is another area of heavy, more expensive renovation. So that's the point of this drawing, is to show you that there are indeed cost breakdowns for these different areas and different levels of effort in the existing building. And then this piece, as I said earlier, is where the new science labs will be located in the footprint of the beginning of the 3-story classroom wing that was started earlier last year. The second floor follows the same format. No heavy renovation areas, but you have this moderate renovation of the art area to get that up to more current standards for the type of art curriculums and art activities, kiln relocation, things like that. The upgrade to this locker room area above the lobby. And then just an overview for everybody's benefit as to what this value engineering proposal is addressing. Okay, so I had that list in the beginning. What are we going to look at, and what did we look at? Well, we did determine an answer on the state reimbursement eligibility. We went and visited with the people at the Department of Education in Harrisburg, sat down with them, showed them the information we had on this proposal, and without getting into a 20-minute discussion of the details, the bottom line is that the district will have to resubmit basically the revised construction drawings with whatever you decide to do with a revised project approach. You will have to create the construction drawings and specifications for that in order to complete Plan Con Part F. We do not have to go all the way back to the beginning and do A, B, D, and E. We can simply start with Part F, create those documents, and most importantly, get them approved through the regulatory agencies. That's part of Part F. In order to go out to bid, you need to have all these regulatory agencies approval. You're not necessarily going to rebid, but you're going to seek change orders to the tune of millions and millions of dollars, and PDE recognizes the significance of that kind of a change, so they want to make sure that all regulatory agency approvals are on board and do approve those changes. Once those approvals and documents are in place and approved, we then move to Plan Con Part I, which is essentially the documentation of the change order costs that you will be receiving from the contractors in and around that time. And then PDE, Department of Education, will have to review that submission of all the changes and the costs, and then give you final approval, and you'll be able to start your construction. So there is basically good news here that you can remain eligible. And again, we can talk until the cows come home about when that money will come to the district. That's a whole other story and a whole other issue, but you are eligible if you follow their rules as outlined here. Conversely, I'll say that the cost to achieve LEED Gold, that level of energy efficiency to obtain or maintain and keep your $2 million grant is probably not going to happen. Considering the way the VE project is described and the cost to take the existing building as it is and upgrade it to a high level of energy efficiency to achieve LEED Gold, as it says here, the bottom line will cost more than a $2 million grant. So it's possible you can do it if you want to spend that kind of money, or spend more than $2 million to get your $2 million. That's a decision you may want to make as you look at or evaluate this value engineering proposal as you move forward. But it's important to know that it'll cost more than $2 million to achieve that. I mentioned on the first slide design and regulatory agency schedule. We have to design these changes. We have to document and detail and put together the construction drawings and specifications for these changes, whatever they are, if you decide to go that route. And then we also have to present them to regulatory agencies. And just a quick review, there may be some overlap here, but certainly the zoning board, borough engineer, the borough, Lycoming County, Planning Commission, or Conservation District, Central Keystone Council of Governments, we already talked about the Department of Education, and also the Environmental Protection Agency, and there may be more, but these are the biggies. So that needs to be worked into the schedule, which we put together here. And I could go down, and I will go down that list on the left-hand side quickly, but I want you to look at the top of the chart. Year 2016, that's the year we're in. March is next week, coming up. Starting in March, going through to November is a schedule that is normal and typical for this amount of work and amount of change. And one could argue perhaps a month one way or the other, but you're not going to cut this schedule in half, I don't believe. And the professionals I'm talking to work with this every day. I'll talk about one of those in a minute. This is a solid, typical schedule that you would expect this amount of time to spend to get to the point where you can start construction. The bottom of the chart says start construction. But real quick, the board would have to select a project approach and the estimates, or review that, and then select the actual option. And you would decide to use change orders or rebid. I think at this time we're solidly looking at a change order approach. The board approves the design contract amendments. You're going to have to amend contracts to your design professionals in order to engage the rest of this chart and do all the work over the next several months, document, put together the construction documents and specifications for the project. I would strongly suggest, and I don't know how we would do it without number 5, the board appoints a project committee to look at educational program recommendations, requirements, project detail recommendations and decisions as you go through and review the hundreds and hundreds of decisions that have come up as you move through this type of endeavor. We would have to do a detailed survey of the existing building to remain at a different level than we did in the study. If you're going to keep a part of the building rather than take it down, you certainly have to get in there and do a higher level for a different level of examination. We would then start the final schematic scope in and around this first couple month period, and then the land development plan starts. The changes that we showed you on the site with parking, that affects stormwater, working with the bus drop-off area and the automobile drop-off area and so on. All that changes the site plan to the extent that we'll have to start the plan and then put together an agency plan, a special agency plan, which is a little bit different. Go through agency reviews, respond to their comments, get the agency to finally approve it, and then develop the escrow guarantee and plan reporting. Now that is about a according to our civil engineers, about a 26-week time period. Even if you take a month out of that, which would be a lucky thing to do, you still don't affect the schedule significantly. You may take a month or maybe 2 at the end. This is a workable, typical schedule, as I said before. Once you have that underway, the architect and engineers start doing design development details. We get into a higher level of detail after we do the schematic definition of scope. We then get the board to approve the final scope and estimate, and then we get into the construction drawings. We get into other agency reviews. We then take it to PDE. PDE approves Part F, and I went over that before. We review Part I and the change orders. In the middle of all that, you're getting change order proposals from the contractors. Once we get down through all this effort, we're going to have a package of drawings that will define to the contractor what to bid on, what to give you a cost estimate on, or a cost proposal for the change order. Until that point, they're not 100% sure. They may have an idea, but they need to have the detailed drawings in order to give you the best price. You may be thinking, why do we have to go to such a great extent to make these changes? It's because you want to get the best and lowest cost from the contractor's change order proposal. If he guesses at a lot of stuff, or it's not clear, or it's not approved yet, he's going to not give you the best price. Then, as we said, PDE will eventually review all those costs. We have to package it all up, show PDE what it really costs, and then you can start construction once you get their approval. Again, I admit that this schedule is open for discussion. We can maybe add things, or delete things, or modify things, but this is a fairly typical approach to this part of the work as we move forward, or if you move forward with the VE project suggestion. Changing focus here a little bit. This is a slide from the original 2014 facility study that we did for the district way back when we first came here. And this was a page in the presentation of some interim presentation of the facility study. And it was important for the public and us and the school board and everybody else involved, faculty and staff, to review these goals and remind everybody that this is what we're going to base our study on, because this is what we're hearing from our meetings with planning committees, talking to the educators and educational professionals within the district and others. But number one, it was the upgrade of facilities to improve and facilitate the educational program implementation. This building, I'll just try to say in 1 or 2 sentences, has been added on to every decade, I think. It was built in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. There's always been something added to this building, and the organization of this building as it stands today. If you ask me as an educational facility design professional, it is not an ideal arrangement of space. You would never start and build a building this way if you're going to start over. It has a lot of efficiency challenges to it, energy efficiency and so on. I'll talk about that in a minute. But that was the catalyst for that first goal, upgrade the facilities to improve, facilitate the education program implementation. Improve the school image. As I mentioned, has been added on to with different styles of construction and different brick patterns and stone, brick, different architectural styles. We're talking about improving the image to try to give it a cohesive, coordinated look to so it looks like an entire building in one place. And safety, increase safety and increase the environment. The third one was to reduce operating costs. And going after the energy grant, the LEED goal, I think is evidence of that. That's how we're looking at satisfying that particular goal, amongst other things that I'll get to in a minute. And also identify the lowest overall cost to meet all these goals. Now, admittedly, these were goals from another school board. I want to emphasize that tonight for everybody. This was from another school board back in 2014 time period, but this was what we were working on, or working with, for the original project that was started in construction here on this site. This list is a compilation. There's another page to it, but it's the beginning of goals 1, 2, and 3. Design characteristics, 1, 2, and 3. This is not an all-inclusive list, but it highlights the key issues that I think are pertinent to this analysis of the value engineering proposal. Number 1, minimize disruption to the students during construction. Now, I'm not going to go down through this whole thing, but you can see here in the middle of the page, I make a statement about how the original design accommodated these goals and what we see in the value engineering proposal. And essentially, the original design takes care of these things a little bit better, sometimes a lot better, and sometimes these things aren't addressed at all over here. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. You can choose to do projects all different ways. It's up to you. You are the decision makers. But I think if you're going to listen to the second part of this presentation when we present costs, I think it's interesting or almost imperative to understand what you have with the original design and what you might not have over here. So starting with the minimal disruption, this had a huge 3-story classroom wing where you put almost all the students into while you went over to the renovation renovate and almost vacate all the students away from the renovation. Here I say the B proposal has less areas of unoccupied has some, I'm not saying it doesn't have any. It has some areas, but it doesn't have as much as the original design. So therefore, you will not minimize disruption to students as much, well, with the BE proposal, interrupt students more than with the original design. That's how this works, okay? Number 2, locate school administrative offices to maximize safety and control, and locate public spaces on one lobby. Basically, we put all the public spaces on one lobby, and the administration can see the bus drop-off area, the parking lots, the stadium entrance, the main building entrance, the auditorium, the gymnasium, the cafeteria, and the community meeting room by just standing outside the door to the administrative area. Now, the proposal does improve on the location of the administration, but it is in a part of the building that basically can only see the entrance to the main lobby. The gymnasium, the cafeteria, and the auditorium are still in separate areas of the building. As you know, this auditorium is on one end, the gymnasium is on the other, the cafeteria is in the middle. There's no way to monitor these areas from one location. So control and safety, to a certain extent, is a little bit less in the VE proposal, and it's maximized over here to make that happen. Improve space organization to facilitate educational programming. Basically, we're saying that the original design groups classrooms together and creates small group rooms and flexible learning areas to improve collaboration and team teaching. It allows interaction between curriculum areas, different curriculum areas, math, science, and so on. It facilitates that to a high degree. And the VE proposal, it's possible to do some of that, but again, it doesn't do it to the extent that the new building would do it. In fact, the proposed science location, well, that seems to be a place to put it because it has new walls and new floors, and the beginning of a space out there is in under construction at the moment. It still is relatively isolated from the rest of the building, so it doesn't facilitate easy and quick and efficient interaction between an adjacent classroom, because there are no adjacent classrooms out there with the proposed science location under the VE proposal. The library would fall into that category also. The library is being proposed as an option to be in the old shop area. And that shop area is about as far away as you can get from the rest of the academic areas in the building. All right, so that's how this works. This will be in the report. It's attached to your report as an appendix. Locate functions for operational efficiency and energy efficient organization. Basically, we created a compact 3-story building. It was easy and quick to get around in. Everything's close together. It's 3-story. Again, it's compact, and it was energy efficient. The VE proposal maintains the existing organization of the building, which is spread out all over the place, and kind of disjointed in its relationships to other parts of the building. Larger auditorium, we've been talking about this a little bit. The VE proposal obviously expands the stage that you see here. We're looking at the stage. Stage opening, but does not provide adequate production space adjacent to the stage opening. On the right and left of the stage, in order for a stage production to appropriately operate, you need a lot of space that goes back beyond the stage opening. We do many stages in many performing arts centers. We hear this all the time. You'll have some, but it's still not really adequate for what they want to do here. The proposal is also to extend the stage into the seating area. Now, where the school board is right now, that stage will come out and either reduce the pit area here or extend it to the seating and take up some seating capacity. The other thing about leaving this auditorium the way it is compared to the original design. Now, many auditoriums operate the way this one is operating when we're standing in now, or sitting in now. But what we were doing over here, we were providing adequate, flexible, and dividable space. The space behind me, where everybody's sitting, we had able to be divided so we could have two big spaces. One, you could do a typical auditorium audience. You could open up that curtain and have a larger group. You could have theater around, you could have black box theater, you could have gallery exhibition space, guest lecturers, large group instruction, and multiple activities at the same time. This is the flexibility that we're talking about that doesn't exist in the existing school. The auditorium is larger, but it also provides a lot more opportunity to do multiple things in the same space. It's an efficient use of space. So I wanted everybody to understand what the difference is between the two. Very quick, upgrade educational technology and equipment. We thought that we should improve the network opportunities, the wireless network capability. So did the VE proposal. We also talked and provided, not talked about, we provided in the project classroom projection equipment, other educational enhancements and amenities in the classroom with technologically to do things we're doing right now, access the internet and so on. That particular part of the work was not, we didn't see that mentioned. If it's in there, we didn't see it. So that seemed to be lacking. Number 7, this goes to the site now. Efficient and safe use of site for parking, bus, and pedestrian. The original design had many sidewalks of adequate width, curbing, separation of bus and auto, pedestrian for safety. Pedestrians knew where to walk. Whether the high school kids will walk on the sidewalk or not, but they had a sidewalk provided. And the buses were on their own separate route. Now, so does the VE proposal to have a separate bus area. But the space left over between the bus and the building is very minimal. It's very tight. And then the parking lots that the VE proposal is leaving as is almost over by the play fields and on the music area of the building. The sidewalks are hard to find. There's a couple of little pieces near the building, but there's really no curbing or separation or implementation of safety mechanisms within the parking to separate the auto and the pedestrian. We'll be walking through that area as they do today. That was one of the things we were trying to improve over here with the efficient and safe use of the site. Maximize parking. I'll just say that we provided in the original plan 307 parking spaces, 84 more spaces than existing. And at the time, back in 2014, when we were working on this project, it was to reduce parking stress on the adjacent neighborhoods. We heard this over and over that big events, people were parking all over. Is there any way that we can maximize parking on the site and still do it in an appropriate and safe way? Well, we got it up to 307. The VE proposal, as I said earlier in this presentation, maintains the 223 spaces, which is the borough minimum. You have to maintain that because that's what you had when we started. You can't do any less. The number 9, reduce operating cost. I think I touched on this earlier. We certainly achieved LEED Gold. That was the plan to do with the original design. It qualified for a $2 million grant. And the VE proposal can achieve LEED Gold, but you're going to have to spend more than $2 million. So you probably won't decide to do that. So the original plan is more energy efficient, will cost less as you move forward into the future 10, 20 years out and beyond. Having said that, I know we're giving you a lot of information. In fact, these are the highlights. I will highlight this piece. What we just talked about in terms of improvements, there is another list of improvements that we strongly recommend that you consider. And they're listed here, but they are not included in the costs that we're going to present to you. These were not necessarily in the value engineering report. They're either millions and millions of dollars, I think you want to consider doing some of these things. One, I will mention a little bit here is the ticket booth. Somebody would say, why we need a ticket booth? Well, where the new Tech Ed building went, there was a ticket booth entry over there, or ticket gate, I guess, that is no longer there because of the development of the new Tech Ed structure. And the plan was to move that entrance over to Mulberry Street and expand the sidewalk and make the entrance to the facility at that point, which would require a bigger ticket booth to allow the flow of that number of people through that location. If you don't have it, then you're going to have to come up with some other way to control people in and out of that facility. That's the one that's, the other one I think that I could talk about, then I'm going to turn it over to Scott and John. Is the second one up there on the list, the kitchen equipment. This was not included in the DD study. Some of this, and I'm sure it's not a lot, but some of the kitchen is very old, from the 40s. There's a rumor it came off of some sort of ship. Yeah, I don't want to blow that out of proportion. I think it's just an interesting point. Because if it did, I thought it'd be kind of cool. But obviously, it's dated and needs to be looked at. And we do have a separate kitchen estimate. We have estimates for all these things if you're interested in adding those on. But I'm going to turn it over to Scott at this point to come up and talk about this. And right afterwards, he'll roll into the costs. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. And just to follow up with the kitchen equipment comment, the 93 edition did replace some of that equipment. The majority of the equipment was remaining from earlier construction. And so that's why we recommend replacing it. The first item on this list, when our structural engineer did come out and do his evaluation of the 1930 wood stone building, he did find some repairs that we strongly recommend doing. I think that area of the building is ripped off, so that is why that appears on the list. And then I'm going to actually turn right over to John Solarczyk, our mechanical engineer, touch on some of the highlights of this, because the rest of the items on the list are more from a system standpoint. So.
Again, these are items that infrastructure items that are in addition to what the study came up with. Some of these items, we'll go through each one. Replace cabinet unit heaters. Those are the equipment, pieces of equipment in entry vestibules, corridors, stair towers that provide the heating for those areas. Simple thing is to replace your exhaust fans. That's the equipment up on the roof that exhausts rooms, storage rooms, and specialty spaces, smart rooms, things like that. Replace all the telecom system cabling. You're going up to getting up to Cat 6 type, today's technology standards for wiring the technology of the building. Replace intercom system. That's your communication to each classroom throughout and from the office. Upgrade standby emergency generator power system. Get some of your kitchen up on your emergency generator. Some of your telecom data rooms. Various plumbing fixture replacements. Some of the plumbing fixtures in the building, the faucets and things were replaced with low flow fixtures, but that's causing a lot of issues with maintenance, where we have a lot of problems with some of the fixtures are constantly clogging and drains are clogging, and it's because they put low flow fixtures on an old toilet or sink. And then replace the water heaters. That's for your domestic hot water heating. Those they've all reached the end of their useful life, 20 years. They were done in 1993, but are definitely need replaced.
And so to expand upon John's comments, one of the statements that we want to evaluate is, will this building last for 20 years? So these are some of the things we think need implemented in addition to the PE study that would make that statement true. We do have the cost, Paul mentioned the cost for this in the report. The construction cost piece of this is around $100 million for the list you see here. And I will touch lastly on the bottom line, movable fixtures and furnishings throughout. So in the current project, of course, with all new classrooms, you have planned purchase furniture and fixtures, tables, desks, chairs, things like that. We didn't see that addressed in the BE study, so we did leave that out of the cost analysis. This is just a recommendation to replace those. So the first thing, what we wanted to do was kind of take a step back and say, all right, from this point forward, rather than looking back at costs spent to date, total project costs of the current project, what does the picture look like today? In other words, from this point forward, what are our options moving ahead? So obviously we're looking at the VE as an option. What is the VE cost? So what are the costs included in that? And later on, I'll also look at what is the cost to finish the current project from today moving forward. So if you're choosing to implement the VE option, in order to get an apples-to-apples comparison with the current project, one of the things we need to look at is what construction costs are there left to complete the currently approved work. The Tech Ed building is almost complete, however, there is some costs remaining for that, so we look at costs for that. Construction costs for infrastructure upgrades. So the way we organized this was kind of aligning with the Bassett VE report. They made a presentation of what was required to upgrade the building to today's standards, and then later on in the report they gave options for reconfiguration. So we broke that out separately, and then next you'll see costs for the additions proposed. And then lastly, we always want to look at things as a total project cost. We don't want to look at just construction costs, as there's other outside costs that are involved that we want to make sure are accounted for. So the first thing we looked at, what does it cost to complete currently approved work? Looking at and this is based on January payouts. I know the February payout, pencil copy payouts have come out, but we didn't have them at the time when we completed this analysis. So, so looking at January payouts, the way construction works, for those who don't know, the contractor may bill $1 million, but 10% of that is held back for retainage, and that's to handle anything at the closeout of a project, or should you have issues with the contractor, you have money set aside that you're holding, that you're not paying them until completion of work. So this looks at, for the in-place construction, there are 10% of that retainage that is completed, but not yet billed. So there's $693,000 that would be owed to the contractor in retainage for that in-place construction. Then we looked at balance to finish the approved work, which is essentially the Tech Ed and the maintenance building. I believe they're looking at final cleaning in the next week, so this doesn't have the work that was done in February. But in the January payout, we're looking at $671,000 to complete the Tech Ed building. And when we look at the comparison of what does it cost to finish or to move forward with the current project, that same analysis is made based on the January payout. So we get a total of $1.3 million for in-place construction and work. Next, we took basically listed out all the infrastructure upgrades and repairs recommended in the value engineering report and applied costs to those. We did use various methods for estimating these, whether it would be taking things from the current schedule of values for work that was remaining, or I think some of these costs are taken directly from the value engineering report, and then just using some of our expertise in designing schools as we commonly do. So the first list here is all the general construction items that were noted in the VE report. Down below is the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. There is in the report that I did hand out, there is a breakdown of all those costs to get to these items here. We don't need to spend too much time on here. I think everybody kind of has read through the report and understands what's being proposed. But essentially, for building upgrades, we're looking at $7.1 million. I apologize for the small scale. There's a lot of information on this. So this this is the building reconfiguration. As Paul mentioned and reviewed in the floor plan slide, the VE study proposes moving around spaces, whether it be administration in front of classrooms or library to the tech ed. This looks at the cost comparison of all those spaces. So you see here we have, this is more based on square foot cost, and we used, once again, based on our experience. We also looked at some schedule of values items to input cost here, and we also looked at, in the report there's more detailed information for this, but the contractors have to, at the beginning of the project, provide GO8 forms, and on those GO8 forms, there's a plan, it's a plan kind document. They break out what is the renovation cost and what is a new construction cost. So from there, we're able to extrapolate a cost per square foot for what they had for additions and what they had for renovations. For renovations, the extrapolated cost was around $99 a square foot, so that'll give you a kind of comparison of some of the numbers we have here. You'll see something like the stage. You know, the VE report acknowledges that the rigging and lighting and sound system need upgraded, and that's to the tune of $245,000, which we got directly from the schedule of values. So that's definitely a higher cost per square foot versus something like the ARC, where we might be moving a few walls to accomplish what we need to do. That's a lower cost per square foot. So the total cost for renovation and reconfiguration is $5.7 million. Next, we looked at the building additions. This one got a little more complex. So one of the things that the report suggests is moving the science classrooms down to the first floor. I mentioned before we're around $160, $200 a square foot for building additions. We're estimating this at $200 a square foot for a couple different reasons. One is one of those more intense spaces of construction. You have science labs, you have fume hoods, you have acid waste storage. You have a lot of complex components that add to the cost of a science lab, but also you're dealing with existing construction that needs modified. There's footings in place where we need to remove them. There's some walls that were constructed as interior walls that the footings weren't low enough, and now they're the exterior walls. So there is some modification and in-place construction, and why we're using the $200 a square foot for that science classroom addition. Also associated with that is a pretty big, large item there of around $96,000 to relocate the primary electric service. Currently, that goes underneath the one-story addition where the science classrooms are. In the proposed project, it was being relocated to a new electrical room. If we go forward with the VE, that primary service will have to be relocated around the building and then connect back to the transformer. Next you'll see here is music additions. Once again, this is a little bit higher cost per square foot than the original building additions because it is a smaller footprint. You'll have the economy of scale that you did with the 3-story classroom wing, and the majority of the addition is interfacing with the existing construction. There's some steel items that you have to worry about, installing beams to support joists and things like that. So we're estimating the building additions of $4.1 million. So this kind of gives you a summary of the costs. These 3 items at the top I went through in more detail. There's site work associated with the additions and the bus loop and the other site work improvements. There's a detailed breakdown in the report that I handed out from our civil engineer. We did leave asbestos and lead abatement in here. It wasn't mentioned in the report, but we figured that that was be something that you would continue with. Next, we have some estimating and phasing contingencies. So one of the, as always, whenever we do an estimate, we put an estimating contingency because we're not contractors, we don't bid the work. However, I will note that on the original $32 million of construction costs, we were within $50 million, $50,000 of our original estimate. We were actually $50,000 in the budget. So we do have pretty significant experience in it, but we're not always right. Some numbers might be higher, some numbers might be lower, but this is a factor to kind of account for that, but also account for any changes that might occur through the design process should you proceed with this option, whether it be additions that you want to add or want to take. There's also a kind of lumped in there was a phasing contingency. So the current project, as you know, was called Touchstone, was phased to complete a 3-story addition, move students over, do renovation over summer, do another addition, and then do final renovations over the last summer. With the BE project, just the nature of how much work you're doing and primarily all existing building, you're not going to have that luxury of being able to do everything over 2 summers. So there's going to be a premium of the contractors having to work in place of around students in the school at the same time and having to move students around and dealing with that, temporary positions, things like that. The next item is a line item that deals with the fact that we are looking at this as a change order. And what's going to happen when you do as a change order, you're going to lose the competitive bidding factor of bidding it out. So you're going to have to deal with the same contractor, the same prime contractor who deals with the same subcontractor who deals with the same supplier. In a competitive bidding environment, you have multiple prime contractors who would deal with multiple subcontractors who would deal with, many different suppliers. We're kind of stuck with the same people and supply routes, so there's definitely a consideration for that where the contractors and subcontractors aren't going to be able to bid this out to multiple people to get competitive pricing. So that leaves us with a subtotal structure cost of $19.9 million. And then for those of you on the board previously, some of this other stuff looks familiar. We always, like I said before, estimate total project cost. So what other costs are associated with any project? One of them is a construction contingency, and that deals with any changes during construction, unforeseen conditions, things like that. And this is basically the number we have in our current budget for the current project. Rather than changing that, we kept that the same. Asbestos monitoring, should they come across any additional asbestos. Construction testing and inspection, that is something that code requires the owner to do separately for IBC inspections, and then we always recommend testing and balancing and other special inspections done by the owner and not out of the hands of the contractor. So that accounts, we basically took a percentage of the construction costs based on what the percentage of the construction cost is on the current project. The enhanced commissioning was something we were doing for LEED, so we left that out of here. However, I would probably recommend if we go in this direction, we want to look at some form of commissioning. Basically, what that does is a checks and balances to make sure the contractors are installing their equipment properly and everything functions the way it was intended. The district construction representative, in the report and the schedule, it goes into a little more narrative to talk about, given the fact that we're not going to be starting the construction until after the end of the summer, you're going to lose that first summer to be able to do some of the work. So in order to get through 2 summers of renovation, really the project needs to go out to summer of 2018. So what this is the construction administration representative's time from now until 2018. Regulatory agency fees, most of those are, all of those are already paid on the current project. There will be some review fees associated with land development and Central Eastern Council of Government to review the plans. So that brings us to a total construction cost of $21.5 million. Next we'll go into project soft costs. So the first item is the design fees. Of course, any endeavor going into this large undertaking, basically it's another option. We'll have to start over from the beginning to, as Paul mentioned, detailed survey of the existing building, go through the design development process, go through the construction document process, and on top of that, we'll have to do this under a complex scenario of modifying the current documents in a way to not only show the contractor what we're adding, but also what we're deleting, and also working through any purchase materials that we might want to incorporate into the design. So you'll see there a 7% fee for design services, and then civil engineering services fee of $48,500 for their revisions and their revised land development submission. Here it gets into movable fixtures and equipment, which I talked about before. We did factor in a portion of that cost to handle the additions and renovations only. Now, this is something that you could choose not to do, but we made the assumption that new science labs will need new furniture. The renovated portions of the building where you might be moving classrooms or you might be moving offices will need new furniture and fixtures and equipment. Similarly, on the technology side, the VE study did make mention the wireless access system and security systems should follow the path or a similar path to what was planned in the current project. So for those, just to bring everybody up to speed, the electrical contractor has the majority of the cabling, the conduit, the wiring, and some of the devices. Not all the devices are in his scope of works, and the devices the district is purchasing separately, such as cameras, servers, things like that. So this is basically the same number that we have in our current budget. And then the tech ed equipment, which I believe was recently reviewed, and I'm not sure the status of this, but the fixtures required for the tech ed building here. So with that soft cost, the subtotal cost, project cost to implement the VE study is $23.6 million. The next line item, I'm going to let Dick kind of explain that because he's been on site dealing with these contractors. But even though we're looking to do this as a change order, there are a lot of moving parts and pieces that we're going to have to account for. And I'll just turn it over to Dick for now.
Yeah, this represents about 10% of the project. We picked that number because we felt as though that was probably low to the middle number that we could expect. All of that would be a matter of negotiation when decisions are made in terms of which way we're going to proceed. We have so far done whatever we could, whatever we thought was necessary to help minimize that number. So this would be Chris Bassett and myself in negotiations that we've engaged in so far. But we would be remiss if we didn't identify a number here that we felt would likely be what we're negotiating against. We haven't even seen what we're going to see, depending on decisions that are made. And I have a feeling we're going to have a lot of things to review and evaluate. We're hoping we can get to this number based on what we can use, that people have committed to and will be expecting the school district to pay for.
Thanks, Dick. So there's those factors that, as Dick mentioned, that we have to account for. This is once again the number I showed you before, the $1.3 million the cost to complete the currently approved work. So when you take the cost to implement the study with these two items, you come with a total project cost of $27.45 million. So as I mentioned before, we want to take a look at what are the options the board has moving forward from this point. Obviously, we have the VE study in front of us and the costs and some of the information that Paul talked about. What does the picture look like if we continue on our current path of construction? So what we did was look at the construction costs remaining based on the January payouts once again, the soft costs remaining so that we can get a total picture of a total project cost remaining. And then we went one step further and identified a few areas of cost reduction should the board continue with the current project. So these numbers are directly from the contractor's payout. These do include the retainage, so there is the 10% of completed work is included in this number. So this is actually not that number doesn't represent the actual amount of construction they have left, whatever amount equates to the amount of construction plus the retainage that you move. Once again, construction continues to see the same line items you saw before, the asbestos monitoring, the testing and inspections, the enhanced commissioning is in here because we are achieving the lead. The district construction representative, you see this is a lower number because we are able to not have to go to summer 2018 for the project. Regulatory HCVs have all been paid So you get a total construction cost of $26.5 million. Next, we'll take a look at soft costs. So once again, design fees remaining on the project. This is basically our design fees, construction administration services. Our lead design fees remain. Civil engineering, this is for lead design for documentation of achieving the lead certification. Civil engineering and food service consultant costs remaining. Movable fixtures and equipment, we basically kept this the same as it is in your current budget. We didn't reduce this at all because we're not aware of anything that may have been paid for or purchased. Pretty sure nothing has been. So that gives you your soft costs, and the subtotal, the project cost remaining for complete the current project is $27.4 million. Now the other thing we have going for us is we have that $2 million grant available, so that is not like the PDE reimbursement. We received that over time. That is actual money available sitting for you to make the payment, make the applications as you move through construction. So at the end of construction, you will have all that $2 million back. So that brings your total project cost back down to $25.4 million. One of the other things we thought we would take a look at was, ideas for reducing the current project. And this is more of a starting or talking point. We're not suggesting doing any of these things, but if we were to continue with the current project, and we make a statement here that additional items can be explored on top of this, but there are three items that kind of stood out to us that are easy discussion topics for ways to reduce the cost. Obviously, the 1931 stone building alternate. We had an alternate to keep the stone building. That was a credit of $804,800. Now, I'll caveat that was leaving that as a shell space, that was not occupying it, that was not making any improvements to it, but should you choose to proceed with the current project and look at ways to further reduce the cost, that is certainly an option out there. There was a terrazzo floor alternate that was selected and included in the project, which looked at terrazzo flooring and other areas. The base bid included the main commons, the cafeteria, and a couple other areas on the main level. This alternate looked at adding additional terrazzo flooring throughout the main corridors of the rest of the building, down to the music addition on the second and third floors. This is something we see discussed very often on all projects of, the cost up front versus the long-term maintenance. Obviously, the terrazzo floor versus a VCT flooring is going to last you a lot longer, but if we're looking to save some upfront costs, this is another area where we can do it. That's $265,000. Similarly, there was a roofing alternate that was proposed, going to a lower grade roof of $130,000. We put in here needs investigated further roofing contractor. This is one of the areas that Dick was talking about. From what we understand, all the materials for the roof for the entire project have been purchased. That's the total project value of that is around $1.5 million. Some of that includes labor, but are we able to get some of that roof back, or can they reuse it on another project? Those are some of the things that we don't know, but we want to at least get the discussion talking. So, just with these three items alone, you're looking at $1 million savings, so bringing the project cost down to 24.2. And additional items similar to this can be explored. With anything, there's a cost-benefit analysis that will have to be done. But it can be looked at in more detail. So this kind of brings everything full circle on the cost side. To summarize the cost, the total cost, project cost to implement the BE studies is around $27.4 million. Project cost to complete the current project is $25.4 million, and a reduced project cost can be looked at 24.2 million. And that sums up our presentation. So, entertain any questions or comments.
reductions, cost savings could there be on the, what's it called, the option 5?
So whenever I'll start by kind of drawing an analogy on another project. We have a different clause in our contract, which is different than the architects, that says if we're over budget on a project, it's on us to get back on budget or bid day. So it's on our dime to fix it. So we go through a process when we, take on a value engineering process or exercise. What we'll do is we'll meet with the contractors, we'll look at their schedule values, we'll ask them what stands out. We'll look at their, like I said, look through their schedule values and evaluate the different pieces of parts and components that you look through. All right, what can we do? Whether it's materials, whether it's systems. We obviously don't want to jeopardize our legal grant, so we're not going to recommend eliminating something that's going to do that. But obviously, with any reduction cost, it's going to come at, what do you use for that? So that's the process. But until we sit down and do that process, I can't tell you. The reason why we presented what we did up here was because those were alternates. Those were kind of easy things that kind of stood out from those numbers. But that's the kind of process we go through.
Another question, the BE study, you said to get to lead gold on that, it would cost over $2 million. Do you have an estimate of what it would be over the $2 million?
We don't, and I'm actually going to have John come up and answer some of that because a lot of that's on the MEP side. There are certain prerequisites for it, like I think I talked about before. LEED has various categories where you can achieve points. In order to achieve any of the points in that whole category, you have to meet certain prerequisites. A lot of the cost is in those, and I don't want to speak too much for you, but one of the things we would have to do as far as analysis to find out where we need to be is actually physically model the building to one of the categories is how much more energy efficient than are you than a naturally standard. In order to do that, we have to physically model the building with the computer to figure out those numbers. So some of that could take a couple of months to even determine what it would take to get there. But I'll let John talk about some of that.
Excuse me, in order to take a facility like you have here and get that up to a LEED standard, just to qualify for LEED, not necessarily gold, to qualify for LEED, you have to do some type of energy recovery in your systems. With the type of systems you have in this building, a lot of classroom ventilators, it's very expensive because it's really a new infrastructure to get to that point. All the lighting in the building would have to be replaced, not just classrooms, lighting controls. All these are different or additional technologies and systems you have to put in order to meet those requirements. Then to get to the LEED gold on this type of facility, we would have to almost introduce some type of photovoltaic alternative energy source on site just to get you to that level. Those types of systems are very expensive when you look at first cost. Those are some of the major items that we would look at in order to get this building to a LEED gold facility.
Another question I have is that the 800,000 that it would cost to tear down the 31 Martin School, that would be saved if that part of the school stayed. Would the heating be tied into that part? Would electrical be tied into that part?
So I'm going to let John correct me if I'm wrong here, but our approach was we wouldn't be able to keep that building without spending money and upgrade, and occupy without spending money. So if you wanted to keep it, the only way we can go would be unoccupied, without, like I said, spending additional money to upgrade it. From a HVAC standpoint, I believe we are doing what was minimal to keep it above freezing level. And from a plumbing standpoint, things would be capped. From an electrical standpoint, it would be minimal for emergency lighting should anybody be walking through the building. And this was all reviewed with Central Keystone Council of Government, and they were in agreement with what was presented. So I will note the credit comes in the fact that we were putting on an addition to the front of where the existing district administration office was in order to centralize a lot of the district staff, bring everybody on site for better collaboration. The reason it's such a large credit is because you're not doing the conditioning. So essentially, one of the things, and Dr. Bowers, you can jump in at any time here, but one of the things I've talked to Tim about, well, would you be able to live with the current district administration the way it is, knowing that, you don't, if you say it's 1930 stone building, you won't have anywhere to expand. So I don't know if you want to expand on that.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. When we first looked at that option, our biggest goal there was to try to centralize all of our administrative teams. So we have supervisors throughout the district that are in other buildings. Our food service supervisor, for example, is at McCall. Our school psychologist is working out of a closet office. Our buildings and ground supervisors in the maintenance shed. So we were just trying to centralize those administrative team members. And we wanted to add conference space when parents come in to talk with us or to meet with us. We needed that conference space. As long as we also were looking at adding that large group instruction area / boardroom space. All those things were put in the goals for central office. So, if we gave up those, certainly as our admin team, we would tell you that all academic space is much, much, much more important in those areas. So, if we have to give up anything, we'd rather give that up than give up any academic space. Does that answer your question?
I recall a number of $1.9 million that the previous board wanted the public to come up with to save that. Now, was that to put heat and electrical and plumbing into that building?
Yeah, that was a full renovation, and one of the things, it's kind of outlined in the report, but I might as well talk about it now. So one of the things is the floor structure. That cost, that estimated cost included addressing the floor structure issue. So, there was the one lobby area that was identified by our engineers as an issue that needs addressed. There were some other code issues that if you don't change the use of the space, like for instance, the bearing of a joist is notched out. The code says what percentage of that joist can be notched out for it to rest on it. It exceeds that percentage in today's codes. So if you were to change that, that would have to be addressed. And then the issue with the floor sloping and the waving floor and up and down is an issue of long-term creep over time of the wood structure that once you're air conditioning it, what the air conditioning will do will solve the ebb and flow over the seasons of changing, but it won't correct it and all of a sudden straighten everything out. So in that cost that you mentioned, and I don't want to don't quote me on the number, I don't have it with me, but that number included also the floor structure and HVAC and electrical renovations.
And plumbing.
And across the board, floor renovation. Yes.
The last number you gave was approximately 24.7 million to finish the current project.
Yes.
Is that correct? Or roughly. The last number that you put up.
Yes.
Okay. What would be, how much money, do you have a total, how much we would have spent? So if we spent that 24 million plus what we spent, what the total would be?
For project costs? Or for construction? I think the 8 million, is it in the, I don't have that number. Like I said, we didn't analyze it from the point of what we spent to date, so I apologize if I don't have that number. I think it's around construction costs of 8 point something million.
So we're roughly around 33 million.
Correct.
I mean,
Yep.
ballpark.
Yep.
Thank you. And that would be subject to change if we needed something that was.
Yep.
allowable
Needed something.
more than all
Yep.
of it.
Anybody else have any more questions?
I'm sorry.
Sure. Yes.
The criteria, is that for the projects, since we're going to have 2 new building tickets and the signs?
Well, actually, I'm sorry.
But can the lead grant be applied to those 2 buildings? Is it new?
Well, actually, since you knew I'll bring up to speed, the tech ed building is actually not part of the LEED project. So we were able to, because to do what we want, to bring the tech ed piece up to a LEED gold standard, the high ceilings, it would be pretty expensive, not to mention off on its own. So what we did was we received an interpretation from U.S. Green Building Council that is a standalone building that does not have to be part of the LEED Gold certification process. So, so that's not part of it. However, you know, anything attached to this building would be part of it.
What is the estimated cost that we're spending to achieve these to get the $2 million grant?
In the current project, I believe that was presented about a year ago. I think it was around 800,000 or 900,000.
So we're
800,000 or 900,000.
$1 million? That's kind of my math, right? Okay. If we were to, let's say it was 2.5 million to bring the old building up to LEED standard. So my math's correct, we get 2 million back, so it would cost us $500,000 to upgrade?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions?
Yeah, the last meeting, I believe it was Mr. Schimmel suggested he'd be willing to help if we decide to keep some of the 1931 building, he would be involved with seeing if he can get grants or whatever, but that's something that we have a year and a half to do. I think it'd be interesting to see how much activity there is to save the old part, but it's going to be the community that has to bring that together. And, you know, but that's something, how bad does everybody want it saved? I think it is beautiful. But, you know, is it going to fit in with, if the new building gets built, what's it look like? Now, that's a test of the community. How are they going to respond, and how much do they want to save? And it doesn't have to be all of it. It could be, you know, it could be from the tower down or whatever. But that is something that doesn't have to be decided this month or next month. There's a year and a half to work on that, see whether something can happen yet.
Let me jump in real quick. So this is something we broached with the contractors at the start of the project, that you know, could be this potential for this to come back should, you know, be community support and whatever it might be. There's going to become a point, and Dick can review this with all the contractors, where it's going to be earlier than a year and a half where a decision needs to be made, because there's going to be, whether it be the demolition, which I think is closer, well, we'll have to look at, you know, the schedule. But I think what we can do is have Dick go back and talk to contractors and say, all right, what's the drop dead date, or if you can hear something about this. But I just want to make sure it's, you don't have in your mind it's towards the end of the project.
What I would try to do on your behalf is get the best picture we can get, okay? And then you guys would have a basis to make a decision on that.
I have a question about the state auditorium.
seen the cost of the tech ed